All right, ready to dive deep into something pretty crucial today. It's all about the future of air power. We're going to take apart this YouTube video. It's from a channel called Strategic Vanguard, and the title is pretty attention-grabbing. Indian Air Force Crisis, Why We Don't Need Foreign Fighter Jets.
Yeah.
It's definitely a hot-button issue, lots of strong opinions on both sides. You know, some folks saying India's got to buy jets from other countries, while others are really pushing for homegrown solutions.
Yeah, it's a complex one for sure. Lots of factors at play.
Definitely. So by the end of this deep dive, you'll really understand the core challenges facing the Indian Air Force, or IAF, and the different ways they could tackle this so you can form your own informed opinion on the whole foreign jets versus made in India debate.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
So the video kicks off with a pretty startling statistic. The IAF needs at least 42 squadrons of fighter jets to meet their, defense goals. But right now, they're only operating at 31. And get this, it's predicted to drop even further, down to 25 squadrons by 2035.
Yeah, that's a pretty steep decline.
Right. And I know what some folks might be thinking. The 42, what's so special about that number? Is it just like some random target?
It's definitely not random. That 42 squadron figure is all about strategy. The IAF needs to be ready for what's called a two-front war, a situation where they might have to fight conflicts with both China and Pakistan simultaneously.
Okay, a two-front war, and we're talking about two nuclear-armed neighbors here. Not exactly a picnic, huh? So how did things get to this point? How did the IAF end up in this situation?
It's a combination of things, really.
Yeah, the video points to a few main culprits, I guess you could call them. Aging jets that are, past their prime. Then there's a whole problem of delays in getting new jets, and of course lots and lots of those bureaucratic hurdles, red tape, slow decision making, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly. And it's important to remember, we're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet here. These issues have real-world consequences.
Oh, absolutely.
Take the MiG-21 Bison as an example. It's an older jet that's been involved in a number of crashes in recent years, sadly. And that highlights the real human cost of these aging aircraft. They're outdated, they're becoming increasingly difficult to maintain, and frankly, they're putting pilots' lives at risk.
It's heartbreaking, putting your life on the line to defend your country, but having to fly in what's basically a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, it's a tough situation for sure.
No kidding. And then on top of all that, there's the whole procurement process, trying to actually buy new jets, the delays, the cost overruns, navigating these really complex international deals. It's a mess, to be honest.
Procurement is definitely a major headache for the IAF.
You can say that again. I mean, look at the Rafale deal. It was a huge step forward, don't get me wrong, but in the end, it only added 2 squadrons to the IAF's fleet, a drop in the bucket compared to what they actually need.
Right. A lot of these challenges come down to Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, or HAL, which is India's state-run aerospace company. They're responsible for producing a lot of India's military aircraft, but they face limitations.
What kind of limitations?
Well, think limited production capacity. They just don't have the infrastructure to churn out jets at the rate the IAF needs them.
Yeah.
And then there's the backlog of orders that they're already dealing with. It's created a real bottleneck in the process.
It's almost like they're trying to build a skyscraper with a team of, 5 construction workers.
That's a good analogy, yeah. They're just not equipped to handle the current demand.
So you've got HAL playing catch-up, and in the meantime, their rivals aren't exactly, sitting on their hands.
Yeah.
The video paints a pretty daunting picture of what the IAF is actually up against.
No kidding. The threat landscape is getting more and more complex.
For sure. So let's talk about China first. Their Air Force has over 1,800 combat aircraft. And we're not just talking about numbers here. They've got some seriously advanced tech, like, for instance, the J-20 stealth fighter. That's a fifth-generation fighter jet. And they've been busy building these, super advanced air bases in Tibet, right on India's border.
Yeah, that's a major concern.
Right. Then you've got Pakistan, who's been rapidly modernizing their air force as well. They've got JF-17 Block 3 fighters. They even acquired J-10C fighters from China. And they're really focusing on network-centric warfare and drone technology. So they're not just upgrading their planes, they're changing the whole way they fight.
Yeah, that's a key point. And what's particularly concerning for India is the sophistication of these advancements. For example, the J-35, which is China's naval stealth fighter, poses a direct threat to India's maritime security, particularly in the Indian Ocean. And then Pakistan's acquisition of over 50 J-10C fighters, that creates a significant capability gap that India needs to address.
Okay, so to sum it all up, you've got a shrinking number of squadrons for the IAF, outdated aircraft, and 2 increasingly powerful neighbors, who are really flexing their air power muscles. It's a tough spot to be in.
It definitely presents some significant challenges.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's why this YouTube video makes a pretty bold argument. They're saying that India should basically focus on building its own fighter jets, become self-reliant instead of spending a fortune on imports. Makes sense on the surface, right?
Well, yeah, there's definitely a strong economic and strategic logic to self-reliance when it comes to defense. Building their own jets would mean, obviously, saving a ton of money, not being so dependent on foreign suppliers, and gaining some really valuable strategic independence. Not being at the mercy of other countries' political whims.
Right. Because who knows what could happen down the road? Relationships change, priorities shift. All of a sudden, you can't get the parts you need for your jets because of some diplomatic spat.
Exactly. It can really leave you vulnerable.
And the video uses the Rafale deal as a prime example of this, as a cautionary tale almost. They point out that India shelled out $8.7 billion for 36 jets. That's a huge chunk of change.
Oh, yeah, it was a big-ticket purchase for sure.
And it's not just the initial sticker price either. There's the ongoing costs of maintenance, spare parts, weapon systems, all that stuff. And all of that's controlled by the foreign supplier. It creates a kind of dependence that can be risky, especially in the world of geopolitics.
Right, and that dependence can become a liability pretty quickly if the relationship sours for any reason.
Exactly. It's like, imagine a diplomatic spat, some disagreement between countries leads to sanctions or supply chain disruptions. Suddenly, your entire fleet of fighter jets is grounded because you can't get the parts you need to keep them flying.
It's a real vulnerability. And that's where India's indigenous fighter jet program comes into play. They've actually been developing some really impressive aircraft that could potentially change the game for them.
It's like the IAF's got its own, superhero team in the making.
Yeah, it's quite a lineup.
Okay, so walk me through this superhero team.
Sure. First up, you've got the Tejas MK2. This is the one they're calling the future backbone of the IAF. It's got stealth features, advanced avionics, it's capable of fighting beyond visual range, and here's the kicker. It's a lot more cost-effective than importing those fancy jets from abroad.
Okay, so homegrown and budget-friendly. I like it.
Yeah, it's a good combination. And then you've got the big gun, the AMCA, or Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft. This is India's answer to China's J-20 and J-35. We're talking a full-on fifth-generation stealth fighter, internal weapons bays, special coatings to make it harder to detect on radar, even thrust vectoring engines.
Wait, thrust vectoring engines? What are those?
They basically let the jet do some crazy maneuvers in the air, like really tight turns and super fast changes in direction. It's like something out of Top Gun.
Wow. Okay, so they're not messing around.
No, they're definitely serious about this. And to round out the team, there's the ORCA, which is the naval version of the AMCA, designed specifically for aircraft carriers. They see it as a cost-effective alternative to the Rafale, and it'll be key in countering China's growing naval power, especially that J-35 we talked about.
Okay, so the Tejas, MK2, the AMCA, and the ORCA. A pretty impressive lineup. But wait, there's more, right?
You bet. Don't forget about the Ghatak UCAV.
Ah, yes, the Ghatak. That's the stealth unmanned combat drone, right? Like a robot wingman for the Tejas and the AMCA?
You got it. And it's packed with AI-powered combat capabilities, even has the potential to fly missions all on its own.
Okay, now this is where things get really futuristic. Unmanned combat drones, artificial intelligence.
Yes, that whole new era of warfare that's emerging.
For sure.
And this brings us to one of the biggest developments shaping modern warfare, actually. The rise of unmanned combat aerial vehicles, those UCAVs, and the role of artificial intelligence. Countries like the US, China, Turkey, they're already integrating these technologies in a big way, and India is clearly not going to be left behind.
I mean, robot fighter jets, that's straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And the video highlights some pretty big advantages to using UAVs, beyond just the cool factor.
William on me.
First off, they're much cheaper than those traditional fighter jets. You could have a whole fleet of UAVs for the price of a single modern jet.
That's a huge cost saving.
Right. And then there's the obvious benefit, no risk to human pilots. You can send these drones into incredibly dangerous situations without putting anyone's life in danger.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's the stealth factor. UAVs are designed to have a very low radar cross-section. It means they're practically invisible to radar. It gives them a huge tactical advantage.
Wow, so they're cheaper, safer, and stealthier. What's not to like?
Well, there are some ethical concerns about autonomous weapon systems, but that's a whole other discussion.
No, we'll save that for another time. But for now, let's focus on the tech itself.
Okay, so here's the really mind-blowing part. AI is allowing these drones to make decisions independently, engaging in both air-to-ground and air-to-air combat without any human intervention.
So they're like little mini Top Guns flying around and making decisions on their own.
Pretty much. And this is where India's Ghatak UCAV could really be a game changer. It's like giving the IAF a whole new level of flexibility and capability that they've never had before.
Yeah, that's a huge leap forward. So we've got aging jets, a push to build new ones at home, the rise of drones, and now, to shake things up even more, India is opening up fighter jet manufacturing to the private sector. It's a big shift, right?
It's a huge shift. For a long time, HAL had pretty much a monopoly on fighter jet production in India. But now, the government's inviting private companies to get involved in building these jets.
So why the change? What's the thinking behind that?
Well, it's largely a response to the challenges HAL has faced. The slow production rates, concerns about inefficiency. They're hoping that private sector competition will speed things up, improve the quality of the aircraft, and maybe even lead to some cost savings.
Makes sense. Private companies are usually a lot faster and more adaptable than their government counterparts. They're always looking for ways to do things better, cheaper, faster.
Right. And they're not afraid to embrace new technologies and innovative solutions, which could be a big boost for India's fighter jet program.
So who are the big players in this private sector defense industry?
Well, the video mentions a few key names. Tata Advanced Systems, L&T Defense, Adani Defense and Aerospace, Mahindra Defense. These companies already have a ton of expertise in defense manufacturing, and they're eager to get involved in building fighter jets.
It's like the whole defense industry is getting a shakeup.
It definitely is. And it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out in the coming years.
Absolutely. So we've got shrinking squadrons, rising threats from their neighbors, a push for building their own jets, the rise of drones and AI, and now the private sector's jumping into the game. It's a lot going on.
It's a pretty complex picture, for sure.
No kidding. So where does this leave the IAF? I'm guessing it's complicated.
Well, the IAF is definitely at a crossroads, facing some serious challenges, but also some incredible opportunities. Imagine a future where the IAF is equipped with Tejas Mk2s, AMCAs, ORCAs, and Ghatak UCAVs, all built in India, with the help of a thriving private sector defense industry. That's a force to be reckoned with.
It's an exciting vision. But the question is, can India actually pull this off? Can they become a leader in air power by 2035?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's one we'll explore in part 2 of this deep dive. We'll take a closer look at the potential of India's homegrown fighter jets, the evolving landscape of drone warfare, and what it really means to have the private sector involved in defense manufacturing.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Can't wait to unpack all that in the next part.
You know what's really interesting here? It's not just that India's trying to catch up. It's that they're aiming to, leapfrog ahead in certain areas, especially with those unmanned combat aerial vehicles. And the Ghatak UCAV is a prime example of that. It's a real statement of ambition.
Yeah, the Ghatak it's like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? A stealthy, autonomous hunter-killer in the sky. It's wild.
It really is.
Imagine a drone that can, take off, find its targets, engage in combat, and then return to base all on its own, and all thanks to artificial intelligence. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is. And it's not just about the technology itself. You got to think about the strategic implications, too.
Yeah.
Imagine a squadron of those Tejas Mk2 fighter jets, each one with a couple of Ghatak UCAVs acting as their wingmen. They could coordinate attacks, provide cover for each other, maybe even act as decoys if they need to, all while keeping those human pilots safe. At a whole new level of warfare we're talking about.
It's like, I don't know, having a superpowered sidekick or something. But okay, let's get back to those homegrown fighter jets for a minute. The video really made a big deal about the Tejas Mk2, calling it the future backbone of the IAF. So what makes this jet so special? What sets it apart?
Well, the Tejas Mk2 is designed to be a real jack of all trades. It can handle a whole bunch of different missions, from air-to-air combat to ground attacks, you name it. Plus, it's got those advanced avionics, including an ESA radar.
Okay, a ESA radar. Now break that down for me. What's so special about that?
Think of it like giving the jet supervision. It can detect and track multiple targets with incredible precision, even in really challenging environments.
So it's versatile and it's got amazing vision. What's not to love?
Right. And it doesn't stop there. The Tejas Mk2 also has some stealth features built in, which makes it harder for enemy radar to pick it up. Now, it's not as stealthy as a dedicated fifth-generation fighter like the AMCA, but it's a big improvement over those older jets. It really shows that India is getting serious about aerospace engineering.
Yeah, they're stepping up their game. Now, speaking of the AMCA, that's the one that's supposed to like go head to head with China's J-20, right?
Exactly. The AMCA is where things get really interesting. Picture this. A fighter jet so stealthy, it's practically invisible to enemy radar. That's what India is aiming for with the AMCA. Designed from the ground up to be virtually undetectable. It's got internal weapons bays to keep everything hidden, further reducing its radar signature, and it'll be packing some serious firepower, including advanced air-to-air and air-to-ground missiles.
Sounds like India's ready to play in the big leagues, take on China in the stealth fighter game.
They are?
But what about their naval air power? The video mentioned the ORCA, which is supposed to be like a carrier-based stealth fighter, right?
Yeah, the ORCA is fascinating. It's basically a navalized version of the AMCA. It'll have many of the same stealth features and advanced capabilities, but it'll be specially designed to operate from aircraft carriers. And that's crucial for India because they've got these big plans to expand their naval power in the Indian Ocean. They need a top-of-the-line fighter jet to protect those carrier battle groups.
It's like they're taking a page out of the U.S. Navy's playbook, developing their own carrier-based stealth fighter. But okay, let's shift gears for a sec. I want to talk about the human side of all this. What happens to all the pilots who are currently flying those, those older jets? What role will they play in this future version of the IAF?
That's a really good question. It brings up an important point about, this whole transition to a more technologically advanced Air Force. Mm-hmm. The IAF's going to need to invest a lot in training and retraining those pilots. They need to learn how to operate these new, super sophisticated aircraft and to work seamlessly with those AI-powered systems.
Yeah, because it's not just about learning to fly a new jet, right? It's like a whole different way of thinking about air combat.
It is. It's like going from driving a stick shift to like a Tesla.
Yeah.
It's a totally different experience.
Right, exactly.
The IAF's going to need to cultivate a new generation of pilots who are comfortable working alongside AI, pilots who can trust these systems to make decisions in the heat of battle and who can seamlessly blend their own skills with the capabilities of these advanced aircraft. It's a huge cultural shift, but it's essential for the future of air power.
Yeah, it's almost like the pilots of the future will be more like mission commanders, overseeing the actions of their AI-powered wingmen.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
And speaking of the future, the video talked about the private sector playing a big role in all of this. What exactly are these private companies bringing to the table?
Well, they bring a lot of valuable assets. They have experience in rapid prototyping, they've got advanced manufacturing techniques, and they're really good at managing those complex supply chains. They're also more likely to, embrace new technologies and come up with innovative solutions, which could help speed up the development and production of these next generation aircraft.
So it's not just about money, it's about bringing in a new way of thinking, a fresh approach to the whole defense industry.
Exactly. And these private companies are also more likely to be open to partnerships and collaborations with international companies, which could give India access to cutting-edge technologies and expertise from around the world.
It sounds like the government's trying to create a more dynamic and competitive defense ecosystem in India, one that can keep pace with all the, the crazy advancements in military technology that are happening all the time.
Yeah, it's not just about keeping pace. It's about becoming a leader. India's got this long history of innovation and technological know-how. And they're clearly aiming to use those strengths to become a major player in the global defense industry.
It's a bold vision, but it's not without its challenges, right? I mean, going from a largely state-run defense industry to a more private sector-driven model, that's a huge undertaking.
Absolutely. There are going to be some growing pains along the way, and there's definitely going to be a learning curve for both the private companies and the government. But the potential rewards are huge if they can pull it off.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges facing the IAF, the exciting potential of their homegrown fighter jets, the rise of drone warfare, the role of the private sector. It's a lot to process, to be honest.
It is a lot. And it's important to remember that all of this is happening against the backdrop of a really complex geopolitical landscape.
Right. We can't just look at these, shiny new jets and drones in isolation. We got to consider the bigger picture. So how do you see all of this playing out? What are the implications for India's relationships with its neighbors, especially China and Pakistan? It's true, we can't just focus on the cool tech and the fancy jets. We got to think about the whole geopolitical chessboard, right? So how do you see this playing out? What are the implications for India's relationships, especially with their neighbors, China and Pakistan?
Well, it's pretty safe to say that neither China nor Pakistan is going to just sit back and watch as India beefs up its Air Force. They're going to respond, most likely by modernizing their own air forces, investing in ways to counter India's new technologies, and we might even see them, working more closely together militarily.
So we could be looking at a potential arms race in the region, with each country trying to one-up the others.
It's definitely a possibility. And that's why things like, diplomacy and communication, those are going to be so crucial here. India needs to be really clear about its goals, reassure its neighbors that it's not looking for a fight, and find ways to build trust and reduce those tensions.
Right, because nobody wants to see a conflict erupt between nuclear-armed neighbors. I mean, that would be a disaster for everyone involved, no question. But beyond the whole geopolitical side of things, there's also a huge economic aspect to all of this. India is pouring billions of dollars into its defense industry. So what kind of impact could that have on their economy as a whole?
Well, the economic impact could be pretty significant. Developing a strong domestic defense industry that creates jobs, it boosts innovation, and it can even lead to advancements in other areas like, material science, manufacturing, even software development. And it can reduce India's dependence on those expensive imports, which saves them a lot of money in the long run.
So it's not just about building those fighter jets, it's about building a whole ecosystem of innovation that benefits the entire country.
Yeah. Exactly. And it fits in with India's larger goal of becoming a global economic power. Having a strong defense industry that's often seen as a sign of a nation's technological strength and economic clout.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's fascinating how all these things are connected,
Yeah.
Military strategy, economic goals, the whole geopolitical landscape, and those rapid technological advancements we talked about. It's like a giant puzzle, all these pieces fitting together.
Yeah, it's a really complex and constantly evolving situation. And that's what makes it so interesting to follow. It's not just about fighter jets and drones. It's about the future of India.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive. The challenges facing the IAF, the potential of their homegrown fighter jets, the whole rise of drone warfare, the private sector's role in all of this, even the geopolitical and economic implications of what India is trying to do. It's been a wild ride. So if you had to pick one key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with, what would it be?
That's a tough one. I think the most important takeaway is that we're living in a time of just incredibly rapid technological change. And that change is reshaping how wars are fought and how nations interact with each other on the world stage. India is really at the forefront of this whole transformation, and the choices they make over the next decade, those are going to have ripple effects that will be felt globally.
Yeah, that's a really powerful point. It's a reminder that the future isn't just something that happens to us. It's something we're actively shaping through the decisions we make and the actions we take.
Exactly.
Okay, well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed exploring the Indian Air Force and the future of air power with us. We encourage you to keep learning about this topic, stay informed about all the latest developments, and form your own opinions about the challenges and opportunities ahead.
It's a fascinating area to follow for sure.
Absolutely. And until next time, keep diving deep.